And we're live again. Welcome anyone watching this stream. I'm Nick O'Leary, creator of Node-RED, project lead. So this is the third stream I've done. Just still getting to grips with it, still figuring out exactly what we do with these streams. But after a couple of sessions doing stuff in the editor, I got some of the guys in the chat last time were interested in seeing some more stuff in the runtime. So that's what we're going to have a look at. There was a possible bug was flagged up over the weekend in the runtime to do with disabling nodes. Well, I'll get into more details in a minute. We're going to spend a little bit of time to step through perhaps what happens when you click the deploy button and the editor sends your new flow configuration back to the runtime, so we can see a bit more about what actually happens and hunt down this potential bug. I've not confirmed it myself yet, so it might be working as designed, but it sounded like there was something up. So where to begin? Do say hi if you're in the chat. If you're watching this in the YouTube archive, then well, say hi in the comments. So I guess that's one thing new. I now back up these Twitch streams to YouTube, so they will appear on YouTube. There's a playlist of them. So yeah, that's why I'm trying to keep each one as being actually something useful. So hi Christian, hi Motoko1. See, it's funny, I see all your usernames and I recognise you guys from the forum, but it always seems weird just saying hi to usernames and not knowing the people behind them. But hi everyone, good to see you. Hi Jim, although you don't want me to call you Jim. I don't know. Anyway, I digress. Let's get going. So, you want to be able to see my screen. There we go. That's, of course, Daryl. Yes, I do know you. That's one thing. I am terrible with names. I have that great ability of when I meet someone and we introduce each other and I pay full attention to their name because I know within 5 minutes of walking away I will have completely forgotten their name. But there we are. Right, let's get going. So the issue, what is the bug? Well, for those familiar with creating nodes in Node-RED, there is, when you stop a node, we call its close handler. Closing the node. We call close. Now, quite a few releases ago, in fact back in 0.17, we added this optional flag to the close handler so the node could be given a hint as to whether the node had been removed from the configuration or was just being stopped and was expected to be restarted. So basically, so you can tell the difference between just a redeploy and a node actually being deleted. So Dadri on Slack over the weekend highlighted the fact that if you disable a node, the removed flag isn't set to true, and just asked whether that was expected or not. And it was a good question. I didn't have an instinctive response, but having thought about it for a bit, it feels like the flag should be true, because if you're disabling the node, then you are removing it from the running configuration. It's not the expectation that during a deploy that it's going to spring back to life. So it seems reasonable to set the flag to true if the node has been disabled. So that's what we're going to hunt down, because allegedly it's not getting that property set. So how are we going to do this? First up, we're in the dev branch. For those following, we did publish our first beta of 1.1 last week. Got lots of really great feedback. There's a whole slew of fixes have gone in. Lots of subtle stuff that the beta has churned up, which is the whole point of doing the beta, which is great. A few more of those to sort out, but we will do a beta refresh in the next day or two, just to help with that. But let's get going. So I've got the latest code. If this is the first time following, so in Node-RED we have the master branch, which is the stable code. The dev branch is the next release. So we're doing all our work for the 1.1 beta in the dev branch. And we use grunt dev as our task runner just to run things up, build the code, get it running, and automatically restart when we change stuff. Okay. Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff I've been working on. Let's get rid of that. So what we want is, we want to track down this flag. So let's first recreate the issue. What we're going to do first up is we're just going to grab a node, any old node, and I'm going to use the inject node. Why not? Because it should have a close handler. Bad example. It is a very old node, so let's not use that one for reasons I won't get into. I'm just having a mental block. What node shall we use? Why not use the comment node? Just because that'd be funny to do. So this on close, and we want a close handler which has the removed flag and done. And all we're going to do is just console.log removed, so we can see whether it's true or false, and then call done. So having saved that file, because we're using grunt dev, see, NodeMon has stopped Node-RED, but it hasn't restarted it. This is a change that has just gone in to handle more signals to shut down Node-RED, and it seems to be tripping NodeMon up. So for some reason I have to save a file twice to get it to spark back up. Right, so that's running. Let's load up Node-RED. And here's a bunch of stuff from the previous stream, if you were here for that. I'm just going to get rid of that, just to not confuse us. In fact, for some of the stuff we're going to be doing, I want actually a pretty empty workspace. So we're going to add a comment node, hit deploy. Okay. Now we hit deploy again. And there you can see console log false. False because the node has not been removed, which is true. We just moved it and then redeployed. What we're now going to do is go in and disable that node and hit deploy. And sure enough, it still says false, and it should say true at that point. Now, one thing Dadri, the guy who reported it, did say, let's just get deployed back into a working state, is if you disable the whole flow and deploy, true. So the removed flag is being set to true if it's the whole flow that's been disabled. So it looks like we're handling that case, but we're not handling the case when it's just the individual node that has been disabled. Okay, so we, I hope that is relatively clear in terms of the problem we're going to investigate. So to start investigating that, I was going to talk a little bit about what happens when we hit the deploy button. A whole bunch of stuff happens in the editor, but effectively it just generates the JSON that is your flow configuration and does an HTTP post back to the runtime. Now, what happens next? I imagine you're all sat on the edge of your seats. Now I was going to try to do a drawing to try and explain this, but time does not allow. Yeah, I didn't get that done. So the HTTP request is thrown towards the runtime. The first place that hits is the actual Express.js root handler for the flow endpoint. So in the source tree, at Node-RED, editor API. So this is the Node module that provides the full sort of REST API that the editor uses to talk to the runtime. And lib admin flows. So in fact, if you're going to index.js, here you can see where it sets up all the endpoints for all the different things in the admin API. And the one we care about right now is the post to /flows, because that's the one. So if we hurtle over to the flows module, somewhere in here is post. There it is. Now there's a whole, because there's all the different types of deployment, all the different options. I'm not going to step through this, but the main thing is it comes down to this function called down here, runtime api.flows.setFlows. So for those who have followed Node-RED for long enough, will remember we did a lot of work, I think in 0.20, to separate out the runtime API from the runtime component from the editor component, to try and put a very crisp API between the two. So that's what runtime API is. It's a I would say a thin veneer, but it's actually, it's thin, but it's very deep. A set of functions that you would need to implement if you wanted to create a custom runtime, or indeed wanted to create a custom UI that drove the runtime. But it calls into runtime API set flows with ops, which has got the information. It's got your flows in and the other flags that are needed for the various deploy types. So from the actual implementation of runtime API is down in the runtime module. So at Node-RED runtime. And it's got an API folder, which is the implementation of the runtime API. And it's all, the file names sort of match the structure of the API. So we want flows. And in here, we've got set flows. So this is what it calls. So again, we're just stepping through the different layers the call comes through. So we've arrived at the REST API. It's then gone through the runtime API into the runtime itself. We're not worried about reload. We're not worrying about version control. It then comes down here. Runtime.nodes.setFlows. So now we are actually deep in the internals. These aren't public APIs anymore. These are deep in the internals of Node-RED. Runtime.nodes.setFlows, which I can tell you if we come into the nodes folder, and this is historical, slightly unusual structure of some of the internals of the runtime. Why we have the flows live underneath nodes, not anyway. It's just how it is, kids. But it will come into runtime lib. Where are we? Runtime lib nodes index.js, and I've forgotten what function we're looking for. Set flows, of course. No. Let's close that. We don't need that. We are looking for set flows, and this pushes the call straight down into the flows engine, and in here there is set flows. Right, we're now actually getting somewhere. This is pretty core of the runtime. So this gets called and it gets passed in with the new flow configuration and other stuff that we're not going to concern ourselves with right now. Well, except the type. So is it a full deploy? Is it modified flows, modified nodes, whatever it might be? Yeah, so it comes in, default type is a full deploy. Don't worry about safe mode for the moment. It comes in, it comes in, it comes in. Then it forks based on what type of set flows it is. We're not doing a reload, so we're coming down in here. So the first thing we do is we clone the configuration so we can start mucking around with it. We parse it, so that turns so a node-red flow is described as an array of node objects, but it's a flat array. This flow util parse config turns that flat array into a much more structured object with the hierarchy you would expect. It's got flow objects, and each flow object has nodes, and it sort of better reflects the logical structure. We've had a to-do item in the backlog for a long time to create a new version of the flow file format that better reflects the structure of the flows rather than it just being this flat array of nodes. The only difficulty is it's just, simple enough to write the code, but a big headache in terms of backwards compatibility and migration and all those other considerations. But that's for another day. So we parse the config, and I'll show you a bit about what that structure looks like. And then this is the crucial thing we care about for the moment, and it's diff configs. So this is doing the work of taking what's already running, the active flow config, and what we are now deploying, the new flow config, and it creates a diff. So it's using that diff, it works out everything that's been removed, everything that's been changed. Basically, it works out all the information we need for the, if we're doing a modified nodes or a modified flows type of deploy, where it's much more selective, where it's this diff function that actually works out what that, what the stop and start lists need to be. Then it does stuff with credentials, yada yada, comes down, lots of stuff with credentials. It saves the flow configuration. Once it's saved, it then comes all the way down here. It updates what its active flow configuration is now. Now that we've saved it, this is considered the active one, although it's not actually running at this point. We then come in and call stop. So stop does just that. It stops your flows, but we pass in the type of deploy, the diff, and mute log is an internal thing. Don't worry about that. And the stop function we'll go and have a look at in a second. I've sort of talked through the logical sequence, but stop is where we need to go next, because if you remember, the bug we're trying to fix is that Boolean flag to a node when it's being stopped. So it's part of the stop logic that we will be getting into. But just to complete sort of the logical sequence at this stage, we stop the flows. We once they've all stopped, we clean up context, basically delete stuff from context for any nodes that no longer exist, so we don't orphan state into context. Then once that's done, we start the flows again. And again, what type of deployment this has been, the diff, and basically the start function does exactly as it says. It works out what needs to be now we've stopped everything that needed stopping. Start then starts the stuff that needs starting. So like I said, what we care about at this point is the stop function, because we're narrowing down, trying to get to that point where are we passing that flag into a flow. Right. I have to say, this is not code I've looked at for some weeks or months, so it's always helpful to step through it like this for me as well. So the stop function. This is responsible for working out given what type of deploy it is and given the diff we've been handed, work out what needs to be stopped. And in fact, because it's useful for testing, and I'm sure we must use it somewhere else, if you don't pass in a diff, this is kind of a placeholder diff, which actually gives you the big hint as to what a diff contains. It contains an array of all the nodes that have been added, anything that's changed, anything that's been removed, any nodes that have been rewired and linked. Those are nodes that are, so for a modified flows type of deployment where we will restart nodes that are connected in any way to a node that has changed. Linked is the array of those nodes. So yeah, just like I said, so this function is working out what needs to stop. And it builds up this array it's going to be an array called the stop list. So this is the list of node IDs that need to be stopped. If the type of deploy is modified nodes, then we want to be stopping anything that's changed and anything that's been removed. So we concatenate those two. And if it's flows, then it's anything that's changed, anything that's removed, and all the nodes that are linked to those. Basically exactly what we just said. Note, we only build a stop list for those two because somewhere later on you'll see if the stop list is null, then we stop everything. So the stop list is kind of only if we need to stop a subset. Right, so at this point we then, for each of the active flows, i.e. tabs in your workspace, we work out whether the flow itself has changed. So perhaps the flow has been enabled or disabled, or something about the flow has been modified. Then that's all good, but what I'm trying to find somewhere in here. In fact, it's here. Yeah, it's right here. It's kind of all buried in. This code could do a tidying up to make it more legible. So in this instance, not only might it be that the flow itself is modified, so it needs stopping, or there is something. Oh, that's right. Okay. What the diff does is when we generate the diff, the ID of any flow that contains a modified node of any sort or a removed node of any sort shows up in one of the arrays, and I forget which. But the point being, flow state change means it's not just a property of the flow itself, but any of its nodes have modified. And then we call stop on the flow itself, on the flow object, which we'll go into next. And if the flow state has changed, then what are we doing here? Flow state change null. Oh, so yeah, okay, I take back a bit what I said. Flow state change means the flow itself has modified none of its contents. We're stopping. If something about the flow has changed, then we pass in null because we need to stop everything in that flow. Otherwise, we pass in the stop list because we only want to select certain things in the flow to stop. Otherwise, and then we also pass in the removed list. And I bet that this is homing in on where we need to be. Oh man, yeah, like I said, This is gnarly logic that I've not refreshed myself on for ages. Anyway, the point being we've called stop on the flow. And what is the flow? Well, flow.js with a capital F. This is the actual flow object, which is a proper JavaScript class. And it has a start function, just as you'd expect. And here's the stop. So stop, calling stop, and we pass it a stop list and a remove list. And like I said, if stop list is null, then we just generate a stop list, which is every node in that flow. We then, removed list is just an array of IDs. I do a quick hack to turn it into an object, so we don't have to do index of to repeatedly look things up in an array. We can just do one pass of the array to create an object, where it's much more efficient than to check whether something is in that map or not. It then basically loops over all of the nodes in the stop list, gets that node, deletes it from the active list, does a whole bunch of stuff around subflows, which we're not going to worry about, but essentially if it's a subflow, it has to delegate the stop to a subflow object. Otherwise, it comes down here, so we're just stopping a normal node. We check, we set removed as to whether this node is in the removed list, and then we call the stop node utility function, the node itself, and the removed flag. And stop node is in here somewhere. So this is what actually stops an individual node. Does a whole bunch of stuff around timeouts and promise handling and all that malarkey. But the key point being, we pass this removed flag in to node.close, which is the function on the node object itself that causes the node close event to be triggered. Anyway, I've probably gone deep enough. The main point being, we need to know whether node.close is true or not. And in fact, looking just a couple lines above, you can see there is a trace statement, stopping node, node.type, node ID, and we add the text removed or not. So before we spend any time modifying code, I'm going to stop node red, and I'm just going to edit my settings file. And I'm going to change my log level. Oops. Let's try that again. Go find my log configuration. And we're going to change the log level to trace. And then rerun grunt. So, I mean, historically, the tracing level of logging has not been as useful as it could be, but this is one area where actually when it comes to starting and stopping nodes, that's where we put a lot of trace in. I'm going to make that slightly smaller so I can make the window wider. Hopefully it's still legible. So now we've started up, you can see we now get debug and trace information. What's interesting, particularly around starting the flows. So let's see. Yeah. So the info, that's what you normally see, starting flows. We then get debug statements for each of the logical flows it's starting. And then for each of those, we get trace statements for each node it is starting. And in fact, it prints out a nice table of the nodes it's starting. So if we put some white space in and go to our comment node, and just hit deploy. So we've had all of this come through. You can see it's stopping flows, and again we get debug and trace. And there we see stopping node comment with its ID, and it doesn't say removed. Well, in this instance I hadn't removed it. So if I now disable it and hit deploy, again, where's the stopping? Well, there's the console.log I added. But yeah, in fact, the trace statement's right above that. In fact, that's quite nice. You can see that that console.log that we added to the comment node is sandwiched in between the trace statement for stopping the node and stopped the node. And it tells you how long it took for that node to stop. Useful for nodes that might hang when you're stopping them, particularly when they do asynchronous work. Cool. Well, so it's a long tour, basically to say, well, we haven't got the removed flag as we want. And that will be because stop node has not been called with removed being true. So let's just work backwards. Just to sort of reiterate how we got there. The removed flag was because the node we're stopping showed up in the removed map. The removed map exists because of the IDs that got passed into the stop function, this array. And that array, so I've stepped back up another level, removed list, that removed list comes from the diff. So the removed list is exactly whatever the diff has generated to say this is the list of things that have been removed. Right, and where does the diff come from? Again, just working our way back up. It got passed into our call to stop. Where was that passed in? Down here somewhere. So there's our call to stop where we pass in the diff. And that diff was generated by this call to flowutil.diffconfigs. So as I said, that does all that hard work of comparing what's running and what we want to be running and working out what's changed. So if we go into the util file, so this is what contains the diff nodes function. Is that right? It is right. Let me just. Sorry, we want diff configs. That's what confused me because the very first function here is diff nodes, but we're not diffing yet. So in here we have diff configs here. And again, this is a gnarly bit of code that just effectively has to compare every object in these two arrays and work out what the diff is. And at the end, when it creates the diff, the result, so basically it's this is the removed property that needs to have our comment node in. And it gets there by virtue of being an object in the removed array. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Now this is where I kind of, because I've not looked at this code for a very long time. So what we need to do, maybe just step through this, might be a bit laborious, but so we diff configs, comparing the old config with the new config. There's going to be a whole bunch of edge cases in here that I'm not going to spend too much time on. First thing we do is we loop over the flows in the old config, and we look for any flow IDs that were in the old config but are not in the new config. Basically, a tab that has been deleted. Then we look for tabs that have been disabled. Now this is relatively newer code around enabling disabling. If you recall, disabling the node disabling the entire flow did cause the flag to be passed in correctly. So there's some logic in here that's good. So again, we loop over all the flows. If the old config has that ID, and so does the new config, so it's a flow we already knew about. The original state is that the old config, when it says original, it's the current state of this given flow disabled. What's its current value and what's its new state? If they differ, and we don't care how they differ, they are just different, then we know that this tab has changed. And then if the original state is true, which means it is disabled, then the node is no longer disabled, so it has effectively been added. Otherwise, it has been removed. Now, what's interesting here is, see, it's only adding the flow itself to the removed array. There must be something else later that then adds all of the nodes that belong in that removed tab to the removed object. Anyway, we then, having done the top level work on the flows themselves, we then look at all of the nodes. Similar pattern. We loop over all of the old stuff, the stuff we already know about. We build up a map so we know exactly what this was wired to, so we can detect changes in the wiring. Here we go. So if this is the magic statement, which is what makes things work when you disable the tab. We check for the node's Z property, which identifies what flow it's on. If that's already in the removed object, then, or this ID does not exist in the new configuration, then we add this node to the removed list. So effectively, from what we've just said, the removed object will contain the flow if the flow's been disabled. So when we come to this point, when we find a node on that disabled flow, we will mark it as removed as well. So this node has been removed or its flow disabled. So if I'm going to take the time to step through this for you guys, I'll add some comments to help. What's this doing? Mark the container has changed. So if the node has been removed, but not because the flow was, do some other stuff. A case we don't care about right now. Else, I'm not going to keep going because we've sort of hit the spot in this function that we need to make a change. It basically goes on and then checks to see whether the tab this node is on is a brand new one, in which case we say this node has been added. Otherwise, there's been some material configuration change. We use a utility function that can diff the nodes and actually check to see if any of its properties have changed. Because we don't just do a simple sort of JSON comparison, because we don't consider a node that has moved, so its X and Y has changed. We don't consider that as a material change to call the node as having changed. Yeah, that's just how we do it. And then it carries on, checks the properties, checks to see if the wiring has changed, looks for new nodes, and yada yada, on it goes. Well, because what we care about here is a node that already exists, so we want to be in this loop looking at all the old nodes. And we so this node has been removed or its flow disabled. Okay. It's almost, we want another condition here. So it's that, or now what do we want to say? What do we want to say? We want to, if we just compare how we determined this up here, we did we looked at the old config.disabled property, and then we did fact I'm not going to quite do it here. We're just going to do this as a brand new if block. I'm sure it can be simplified in a minute. So we're going to say this node has been disabled. So let's see its current state. Sorry, just trying to think through. There are just lots of different cases to deal with. In fact, we're going to stick something in here. So we deal with the case where the flow has been deleted, the flow's been removed or disabled, or the node has been deleted. Then we're going to say else if no, not quite here. Here we go. We want it further down. So we handled its container's been deleted or it's been deleted. Good. Here we handle it's been added. Good. Then what we want to do is here say current state is node.d. So confusingly, and I got caught up by this the other day, flows use a property called disabled to say whether disabled or not. Nodes use a property called just d. Just one of those crazy things in life. So current state is node.d, and that's all goodness because the node won't have a property called d if it is enabled. So current state is going to be whether it's disabled or not. New state. Now I'm trying to work out whether we know that new config all nodes. Do we know that this node exists at this point in the new configuration? Yes, because it would have fallen in here. So we know. So we can go get its new configuration and get its D property. And all we care about is if current state is false because it's not currently disabled, and new state is true, which is to say it is being disabled, then we add it to the removed list. Yeah. Okay, that's good, I think. See, there must be some logic to handle. I'm just trying to think. There must already be some logic to handle stopping the node. Maybe there's a bigger issue here that hasn't been found around modified flows and nodes. Okay, I'm not going to dwell on that for a second. there. So all I've done is I'm now comparing the, have we gone from the D property being false or non-existent, which means the nodes were enabled, and the new state being disabled. Yeah. Okay, let's try that out. Be worth a crack. So of course we want to start with the node enabled. Where are we? Okay, just give ourselves plenty of white space so we see the messages arrive. Now we're going to disable the node. Oop, so we've deployed, it's disabled, and stopping node, comment node removed, and we've printed out true. Yay, that works. That's goodness. So, that's 45 minutes to get to the point of 5 lines of code, but I'm hoping for those following at home, if you've been able to follow me along, that you kind of get a sense of why, how we've got here, what it's doing, and what this is all about. So that's good. Something that's going to be a little different from the previous streams I've done is unit tests. So this is a whole area of code that has quite a lot of unit test coverage. The fact we had this issue clearly indicates there's a gap in those tests. So I'm going to use 5 or 10 minutes now just to show how the tests are arranged, and how, hopefully add in a test case for this. So how are the tests arranged? So in the source tree, we've got a test directory, under that a unit test directory, and from there it mirrors 100% the source tree. So we want to go into @node_red, runtime, lib nodes flows util, lib nodes flows util. So unit tests @node_red, runtime, lib nodes flows, and here we have util_spec.js. So one of the unit tests we have in the core, in the runtime, is every single JavaScript file in the source tree must have a corresponding unit test file _spec. So it has to be a one-to-one match. So that is a well-intentioned, so that we can't just add new code to the new source files to the runtime without consciously adding in a test file. Now, we do verify that the test file isn't 0 bytes long, so you can't just touch the file and leave it at that. But we don't check that there are any actual valid tests in it. But this structure does mean if you are looking to make any changes or additions to the core, there's a very close affinity between the unit test file and the source file itself. So unit spec, let's have a look. So we use Mocha as our test runner. Let's collapse all this down. And we care about diff configs. Now this is where it's going to get a little hairy. So these are all the different tests we have. So in fact, you can see the last 2 tests that have been added are marks all nodes as removed. Well, the very last test marks all nodes as removed when tab state changes enabled to disabled. So in fact, we added the the unit test for when we added the ability to disable whole flows, and we failed to add in a unit test for when we added the ability to disable individual nodes. So that's what's missing, and that's why I didn't get caught. So we can add it now. Hi Agilus, good to have you join us. So let's get this written. In fact, let's just show the test running. So we've got Mocha, and we can run it directly. I mean, Grunt will run the whole test suite, but we just want to run the one. Test unit node red, where we runtime lib nodes flows util. Mocha command not found. That's because I've not set this machine up to run unit tests. Install. Is that right these days? Oh. Have I got that right? Yay. There we are. So, quick and easy. Got 50 tests passing. So in good fashion, I'm going to go into utils and I'm just going to comment out the code we added, because it's much better to write a test that fails and then fix the test. Then, yeah, you know what I mean. Marking your own homework. So marks a node as removed when its state changes enabled to disabled. Okay, and then here we have a simple flow configuration. I mean, it's all dummy data. We have a tab type and then a node of type test. We don't care, but the key thing is it's on. It has a Z property of 1, as in it's on our tab, but we don't care about that. So config is going to be the starting config. We then create the new config, which is the config we're going to be applying. And we want, instead of changing the tab to disabled, we're going to set, and remember it's D for nodes rather than flows. So we set new config 1, the second element in this new config array, i.e. this node here. We disable it. We parse the two configurations, the original change ones. We then diff them. And then we examine all the different things that have been diffed. So, let's see if I can get this right. Removed should have length 1 in this instance, because we've only removed that one node. And the ID of the node removed, you can just see peeking up in that top corner. It's this ID 2. So, so when we diff these two flows, the only thing that has changed, now it's possible that, yeah, let's just see what that does. Yeah, that failed. That failed because changed, yeah. So things have actually changed. So it's unlike the test case we just copied, which was about removing stuff, in which case changed is empty because they've not changed. Things have now changed. So both the node and the flow it's on have changed. In fact, I can just copy. So we're saying this diff should tell us that both 1 and 2 have changed. And that test is still failing. And it's failing on 796 because it's saying the removed array should have a length of 1, but it's failing because it's got a length of 0. Well, that's exactly the bug we're fixing. So if we go now and comment back in the fix we did, all the tests pass. So, success. It's nice when it is relatively straightforward. Yeah, so the tests are fairly good around in the core of the engine, particularly this stuff around diffing changes and working out the flow configurations. Although our overall unit test coverage has dropped below 80%, for a long time we were up in the low 90%. But then I think the projects feature really triggered a nosedive in the unit test coverage, just because the sheer volume of code in the project's work that still hasn't caught up. So, but in terms of what I wanted to fix tonight, pretty much on schedule. Yeah, that's goodness. So at this point, I'm going to go reopen up the comment node and undo that change, because we do not want to commit. We don't want the comment node to start randomly console.logging. Otherwise, yeah, I think we're happy. So, unit test pass, that's goodness. We have got the change. Yeah, so we check the current state. Current state and the new state. If it was false before and is true now, it means it has been disabled, so we're removing the node. Good. And we have the unit test for it. So we add those both. Now you'll note I haven't done a pull request for this one. It's 2 minutes to 9. I'm going to skip doing the pull request. I'm just going to push this fix because I'm happy with it. We're going to do flag a node as removed when it is disabled. Good. Push that up, and that fix will be in 1.1. Great. So I hope that was helpful or interesting. As I said last time, we're kind of at that stage of the 1.1 cycle that there's not a whole lot to do in the runtime itself. A lot of the polish and a lot of the work is actually in the editor at the moment. But it was good to cover this. So, question for Christian: did we cover do you mean when you go from the disabled to enabled state? In that instance, that case is covered because oh no, wait. Do we care? So the node, okay. We're focused on making sure we add this node to the removed list because semantically the node is being removed. We haven't done the inverse, which is if we go from the disabled state to the enabled state, we don't add it to the added list. Does that matter? So you might say that's, you want to make sure you mirror that and it's sort of logically consistent. I don't think we care. Let's try. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, let's if we re-enable this node, then it's there. You can see the node is listed. Yeah, I don't think we care. Is in, you know, we let's have a look. It was good to ask that question, Christian. I really don't think we care about that, it being in the added array. So let's. But why do we have added at all then? If so, we have the added list for when we're checking to see whether a flow has been added. Well, we're not adding an entire flow here, so that's okay. Where else do we care about? Yeah, so in terms of actual where we use added, because we're restarting the nodes regardless. We are, yeah, it doesn't matter if it's newly added or not. It's the fact it's there means the node will get started. So that's not an issue. I don't know whether my thinking out loud has convinced you guys of that fact, but yeah, this is the only place we actually care about what's in that added array, and it's all to do with entire flows that have been added rather than individual nodes. That's a good question. Yeah, it did suddenly made me stop and think about that. Okay, well, that's the hour. I don't want to run on much more than that. Like I said, the 1.1 beta, yeah, I've got a nice long list of fixes have already gone in. Yeah, so everything is in added except in disabled. I don't know if that's the case. Let's rather inelegantly just print out the added list. Right, so that started up fine. Oops. Let's deploy something. There, so it's an empty array there of what's been added. If we add a random node, deploy. So the inject node does get listed. So that's the node I just dragged in and added. You can see it. 4E7. If I disable it, again, the added array is empty because we didn't add anything. Deploy and it's empty again. So why might we care? I'm gonna have to think about that one. I don't think we care. I'm happy with what we've got. I'm just looking through. The only place I could see us using that added array is this trying to detect if it's a flow that an entire flow has been added. Yeah. Okay. I could stay here and stop talking whilst I try and think it through, but I think that'll get a bit boring. I'm going to leave it there for this issue. Like I said, the whole bunch of fixes gone into the beta. If you've already tried the beta, thank you. Provided some feedback. Thank you very much. There is a bunch of new stuff already landed. For example, the search box now has a a set of predefined filters, so you can quickly search for different types of things, and the search syntax has been updated to search for stuff like that. All of this is, I raised an issue because it occurred to me staring at it that this configuration node sidebar that we've had for a long time, which is empty because I've not got any config nodes, it's kind of redundant if this outliner is going to be useful, because it has all your configuration nodes listed on it. So we've been looking at what's the functionality missing compared, if you compare the configuration node sidebar. One of them is this blue border that appears when it gets focus. I think this is the latest Chrome. They've updated their default focus style, and for some reason the config node gets this blue border. The config sidebar gets this blue border when it has focus. It's very strange. Anyway, I digress. One thing it has is this quick and easy way to list all of the unused config nodes, so you can delete them and tidy them up. So this is why we've added a shortcut to set the search terms to show me just the unused config nodes. But whilst I was there, we've added unused subflows, unknown nodes, so stuff you've imported that you haven't got the right nodes installed for, nodes with errors, so invalid nodes, and other stuff. I'm sure we can think of some other useful searches. And what's quite nice is, if you followed the previous stream, this search widget is a standard widget, like we use it over here in the palette filter. We use it, well, wherever there's a search box, it's the same widget. So this ability to have a drop down with a bunch of predefined search terms is a common facility of this search box. So we'll be able to add, I've not done it yet, but I'll be able to add it to this box with like one line of code to have a similar drop down, which would be nice. Anyway, I digress. Yeah, so keep an eye out. We'll refresh the beta probably tomorrow. I think enough good fixes have gone in. There's still one or two. So if you follow on the forum, some of the users were having an issue when you edit a group, and clicking done was causing it wasn't closing the dialog and was causing a big error in the stack trace, and to do with JSON serialization or stringify some JSON. It's a really weird error that I cannot explain. So if anyone watching this stream was one of those who were able to hit that with the beta, please do give me a shout on Slack, because I would like to spend some time trying to figure that out. Yeah, I don't like those sorts of bugs that shouldn't go wrong like that. My main worry is it's being caused by some weird interaction with a third-party node that I haven't got installed. That's kind of what it smells of. So I need to find someone who can reproduce it reliably enough, and we can then go bug hunting together. All right, I've run over, but I'm going to wrap it up there. So thanks, everyone. That was a useful diversion into the runtime. If there are any other topics you'd like to see covered, do shout. I'm trying to build these up as a useful archive of topics, but sometimes it will just be me doing whatever's on my list to do. Well, it's always whatever is on my list to do. Just shout on Slack, on the forum, on the chat here, if there's any particular areas you'd like me to cover. Couple adverts. We've got OpenJS World, so the OpenJS Foundation that Node-RED's one of the projects of. Our free 2-day conference is in 3 weeks' time. I'm doing a talk, and in fact the rest of this week is one of the fun things of doing virtual conferences is they not only do they want my slides 2 weeks early, they actually want the video of me giving the talk 2 weeks early. So that's what I've got to get written and delivered this week. But we're also going to do a 2 or 3 hour session on Monday, well, I guess 2 weeks today, Monday the 22nd. We're going to do, hopefully, still figuring it all out, but we'll do a couple of hours online workshop, live stream, some sort of forum around creating nodes for Node-RED. So if that's something that you're interested in, keep an eye out for that. We'll be advertising it when we know exactly what we're doing, whether it's a workshop, whether it's office hours where you can come to us with questions, or what. I don't know yet. So if that's something you're interested in, look out for that. Yeah, OpenJS World in a couple of weeks' time. Great. Well, have a great rest of your days wherever you are in the world. I'm going to go have a cup of tea and not long go to bed. Cheers, guys. Bye.